Good afternoon. We're back again for the second installment of Chapter 2. And again, it's Fisk University, Econ 24001. And the first installment spent just a few minutes recapping what we learned in Chapter 1 and kind of give us an introduction, I guess you could say, into Chapter 2. But now we're going to delve a little deeper into what people call factors of production, inputs of the production process, scarce resources. They may all be semantics, but it's at the end of the day, it's what quote ingredients go into the recipe that either individuals use or entities use or organizations or economies use to generate goods and services. And I've talked in the past along the lines of land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. The text that we're using today for this class define it a little differently. It's more defined as labor, capital, and there are two types of capital: financial and capital stock or economic capital. There is rather than land, they refer to it as natural resources. And lumped into entrepreneurship, they also lump technology in there. And as we kind of go through it, it'll make sense as to why they're doing it that way. Different economists have different ideas on how things should be discussed. And I'm not sure one way is any better than another, but we'll kind of follow the textbook on this one. And the authors talk about, labor as basically human effort that can be applied to the production process. So again, it's applied to the production process, taking scarce resources, implementing them into the production function to generate a good or service. Labor, if you go into Starbucks for a cup of coffee, it's the barista, it's the individual that's running the cash register. If you walk through the doors at Meharry, it's everybody that's there within the building or within the confines of the offices, working together with the inputs of production to generate healthcare goods and services. And they talk about quantity versus quality, and they break the labor force down into two sections. They talk about unskilled, and they almost talk an unskilled labor force as kind of a natural resource. It's individuals using just their natural ability. They may not have a high school education, definitely not a college education, and they're just using natural ability to work within the labor force and to help, again, generate goods and services. And then there's the human capital aspect that they talk about, and it falls along the lines of individuals that have the natural ability, but in addition to natural ability, they maybe have a high school education, may have a college degree, they have experience in the workplace, they may have some additional credentials. And as they build that human capital, they become a more valued resource within the production process. And so it's two things you want to worry about on the labor. It's how much labor is available in the workforce, and what's the level of human capital within that workforce. I managed the payment integrity team for Blue Cross Blue Shield in Western New York. And part of the payment integrity team, the way I allocated the resources, you were either an analyst or you were a clinical individual. And if you were an analyst and you were reviewing healthcare claims, I wanted to expand your human capital by suggesting that you receive a coding credential, certified professional coder. The health plan was willing to pay for you to go and take the degree and get your certification. and then you guaranteed the health plan. You would come back to the health plan and work for 2 years at no cost to you as to get the certification. After 2 years, you could go somewhere else if you wanted to. That was the analysts took that route. I had a group of nurses that were certified coding specialists. They took a similar route. They were focused more on medical record review, medical chart review, how the clinical aspect worked into payment integrity and identifying fraudulent providers. And then I had a group of true analysts that were medical economists. And a lot of those analysts decided that they wanted the credential of a Lean Six Sigma. So sent them to school to get their black belt in Lean Six Sigma. And what all of this did is it built a significantly more effective team. The team was more efficient. And in building human capital, I knew that they would be valuable resources to the health plan for at least 2 years. So I would get at least 2 years of productivity out of them before they decided to leave and go somewhere else. So that's what you're looking at human capital. And also, I think somewhere in the text, they talk about if the number of available individuals in the workforce were not sufficient to generate the goods or services they need, that there were other opportunities to open up and expand that workforce. And we're really seeing that again as an impact of COVID-19. The workforce is drastically changing, especially hospitality, even within professional avenues like IT and health plan management, white collar jobs. We're seeing a drop in at least the number of workers out there. And unfortunately, as you see that drop, a lot of the workforce that's declining is actually an older population, a population with experience, a population that has historical knowledge that is valuable to the firm. So what the text talks about is as you expand, if you want to expand the numbers, I think they talk about immigration policy. They talk about lowering the work age. They talk about raising the Medicare retirement age, a different group of alternatives to expand the number of that workforce. And I think you're seeing it. If you go to, especially a lot of your fast food restaurants, you see a lot younger population and you see a lot of an older population working, especially cash registers, working the drive-through, those types of situations. And went to a local restaurant yesterday. My wife and son and I went, and while we were there, and this is a restaurant that provides, it's a burger joint, hamburgers, French fries, hot dogs, milkshakes, sodas, excellent food, great price, great value. And the thing that they've done ever since the issues with COVID is they have a very young workforce. It's mostly juniors and seniors in high school. These kids are running the cash register. They're delivering orders. It's not you go to the front, you order, you pay, you go sit down, they give you a number, they deliver your food to you. It's an energetic, very young group. Back in the kitchen, you see the individuals working in the kitchen, and it's a kind of a homogeneous group working in that kitchen. And while we were there was an individual came in from the local news station, and this individual is actually doing a news broadcast or trying to put together a potential news broadcast to highlight that the number of young people that this burger joint had working, and how the kids liked it, and why they were working there, and the advantage of them working there to the business. So you're going to see a younger workforce going forward, I think, and you're going to see a group of individuals in an older population either continuing to work moving forward, or maybe they've retired and they decide they want to go back part-time and do some work. So it's going to be interesting in the labor force going forward, and I think there's going to definitely be some changes over the next 5 years or so. Secondarily, they talk about capital, and capital. Think more along the lines of, most people, especially in the business world, when you say capital, they think about financial capital. They think about money. They think about either money or paper, that bonds, stocks that you can actually turn into money somewhere down the road. And I think what the text is trying to get everybody, or trying to get students to understand, is there's two types of capital. There is the financial capital, the money and the paper, but there's also the capital stock or the economic stock. If you go into Meharry, you've got the building, you've got the land, you've got the telephone, you've got the X-ray machines, you've got all the lab equipment, you've got all of the equipment within the building and on the floors that are providing those goods and services. I mean, everywhere you go that has a business, there is some level of capital stock. And it's just not, capital stock is just not solely tied up in machinery and tools. You can also have capital stock in software. You can have capital stock in proprietary development or proprietary research. All of that is considered capital stock. And the two things that a input requires to be considered a capital stock, the resource itself has to have been produced. So if you're in Meharry and you're operating the radiology machine or the CAT scan machine, that machine was produced somewhere along the way. And so it was purchased by Meharry, and it is in providing X-ray type services. And then secondarily, the resource has to be used to produce other goods and services. So again, go back to the X-ray machine, it's been produced, and now it's being used to produce healthcare goods and services. Go into Starbucks, the coffee maker, the machine that generates the foam that goes in your coffee, the microwave they use to heat your sandwiches. Those are all capital stock, economic stock, and they are used in the production process. So very important on the capital stock to be used in the process. And then the next resource, or the next scarce commodity that they talk about, are natural resources. And natural resources are almost, as they say, they're basically raw materials. They're originally found in nature, and they are used to produce goods and services. They do make a specific comment about natural resources don't necessarily have to be used to generate goods and services. Natural resources can also be used to optimize utility. So you're at the national park, you're in, Yosemite in California, you're at Grand Teton, you're in Yellowstone. Just the beauty of being there in that natural park and the national park and that natural environment with all of the natural resources, those help to optimize utility. So natural resources can get a little fuzzy, but it's basically found in nature, and it's basically used to generate goods and services, or it's used to optimize utility. And then there's always the concern about natural resources. What happens when they're depleted? The supply it's not an infinite supply. At some point, it can be depleted. And they talk about the three ways that you can expand those natural resources. One is just a new source of natural resources. And I think the example they use is the gold in the California gold rush, or the uranium, that because it is at that point in time, it was a brand new natural resource. So that's one way to expand. And the second way is new usage for natural resources. And they give the example of the oil production. So, they found oil in Pennsylvania, they found oil in Texas and Oklahoma. And so as time went on, they used those, and it was a new use for a natural resource. So it has truly expanded gas, natural gas production, gasoline, oil refineries here in the United States. And then lastly, new ways to extract natural resources. And there they talk about fracking or horizontal drilling. So new ways to generate new avenues of natural resources. And those are going to be avenues extremely important because there is a significant concern that our natural resource supply, since it's not infinite, that at some time we will run out of natural resources. And then lastly, and to me, maybe most importantly, they talk about technology and the entrepreneur. And spend just a few minutes talking about an individual. His name was Joseph Schumpeter, and he was an Austrian economist, Schumpeter. He was an Austrian economist, and he came up with the idea of creative destruction. And it's basically innovation, technological change. And he talks about it in the process of innovation and technology change, you are destroying the current economic infrastructure and replacing it with something newer, better, more efficient. And it's the way that you move technology forward. You are destroying the old way and you're bringing in the new way of doing things. And the goal being with technology and innovation and automation that you can make the production process more efficient, you can generate more production, and then you can expand economic growth. And Schumpeter was kind of the instigator of this concept. And I think it's a concept that is very valid, especially in the production process. Production technology, you transform inputs into outputs, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the robots on the GM assembly line in Detroit, or you're talking about the robotic surgery in hospitals. There's an issue years ago when laparoscopic surgical procedures came on board. They were extremely expensive, and health plans didn't really want to go the laparoscopic route. It was more costly to them. So, and there was a struggle to get that implemented. And I think in healthcare, just in general, whether you talk to practicing physicians or hospital administrators or even government officials, there is some concern that, especially in the healthcare industry, there could be a lessening of technology and the advancement of technology because it is extremely expensive. And who's going to pay for it? Health plans don't want to pay for it if they don't have to. The government themselves don't really want to pay for it either. They want the new technology, but the government is basically not in the business of wanting to pay for that. They'd much rather the health plans pay for it. But again, who's going to pay for all of this technology and the advancement of technology in healthcare? So it's a little different maybe in healthcare than other arenas, because it seems like technology may be more readily embraced in some other market economies than maybe healthcare. But I think it's something that needs to be reviewed and we need to stay on top of going forward, especially in healthcare arena. And then they talk about the entrepreneurship or the entrepreneur themselves, practicing entrepreneurship. And they talk about them as the individuals who are looking at a process and they've driven by profit margins or profit motivation. They're trying to develop new technology. They're trying to develop new processes. They talk about building the better mousetrap. They're trying to improve the current technology. And they also talk about the entrepreneurship as being, or the entrepreneur themselves as being vital to kind of the speed to market for new products. They were talking about hoverboard and some things along those lines, but they need the entrepreneur to go out and really identify, and it may be something along the lines of identifying some financial capital to help jumpstart the process of getting the new innovation to market. But entrepreneurs are very valuable in that whole process. Kind of digress a little, because I think not only are entrepreneurships valuable in those veins, but to me, entrepreneurship can be just the basic attempt at trying to improve processes. As the director of payment integrity, one of the goals, or one of the annual goals all of my team had, is everybody had to identify at least 4 process improvements a year. I tried to get them to do them once a quarter, but some people would end up with 8 or 10 process improvements. Some struggle to get to 4, and I think it was based on the mindset that they had. But as they identified more and more process improvements, we became more and more efficient as a team, and were able to do more with less, especially in that payment integrity space. So it worked out really well for us. And leading the charge in that process improvement were the analysts that I'd sent to Lean Six Sigma training. Once they got their black belt, they were able to sit down and, schematically look at the processes and kind of work their way through, identify inefficient strategies or inefficient components of those processes, and change those processes going forward. To summarize this group of, or this piece of the puzzle in chapter 2, we've been talking about factors of production. Again, we've got labor, you've got capital, whether it's financial capital or capital stock. You've got natural resources, which again, maybe one of the most important natural resources we have is land. And we've also talked about technology change, the importance of change, creative destruction, and the role of the entrepreneur. So the next installment, we will move forward into chapter 3 and continue to add these tools to your toolbox, so that when you get out, and whether you go the economic route or you go through another discipline with an economic background, you're going to be more successful when you get out in the workplace. Talk to you soon.